Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you today to Silk Road's State of Talent Management webinar. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us today. I hope that you'll find the session both interesting and insightful. Before we get started, I'd just like to take a second to introduce you to our speakers today. Firstly, to myself, my name is Melinda Ersden, and I am Head of Marketing for Asia Pacific with Silk Road, based here in Singapore. I'd also like to introduce you to David Guazzarotto, who is the CEO of Future Knowledge for Asia Pacific, based out of Sydney. David is one of Australia's leading authorities on HR talent management and social collaboration technologies, and he's worked with organisations not only in Australia, but throughout the Asia region as well. He spent more than 20 years working at the intersection of people management and technology as an influencer, a thought leader, a consultant, and a change leader. And in that time, he's worked with some of Australia's leading brands, building organisational capabilities and driving transformation. I'd also like to take a moment to introduce you to both of our companies today as well. Firstly, Silk Road is a leading provider of cloud-based end-to-end HR solutions that help companies build their bottom line by attracting, motivating, and retaining top talent. We're perhaps best known for our award-winning LifeSuite solution, which was designed to engage every employee from the day they are hired until the day they leave the organisation. This integrated solution suite can be entirely employer-branded and consists of 6 applications that are powered by social, mobile, analytic and cloud technology. Firstly, we offer Open Hire, which is a recruiting management and application tracking system. We also offer Red Carpet, which is a comprehensive web-based onboarding and life event system. Wingspan is our unique performance management system, while Green Light allows you to develop learning and management programs for your employees. In addition, we offer Heartbeat, which is an HRMS system for a global workforce, and Point, which is a social talent management and collaboration solution. LifeSuite is ideally suited for businesses of all sizes because of its unique open start anywhere architecture, which means you can implement the complete suite or begin with one module, depending on what your needs are. It's also a critical system in helping HR become more strategic, because it helps free up time to focus on supporting business objectives and ultimately helps HR earn a seat at the table. Silk Road itself is headquartered in Chicago. However, we also have regional headquarters in Paris and Singapore. Here in Asia Pacific, we have 10 offices on the ground, from Tokyo and Shanghai up in the north of Asia, all the way down to Melbourne and Auckland in the south. We are the only cloud-based talent management provider to offer full delivery and support capabilities throughout the region and in multiple languages. And we've worked with some of the region's leading companies, from Lend-Lease to Singapore Airlines, Save the Children, Lane Crawford, and the Philippines Ayala Corporation. I'll now pass over to David to introduce you to Future Knowledge.
Thanks, Mel. It's great to be here today, and thank you for that fabulous introduction before. And thank you to those attending for taking time out of your busy days today. Now, I'm from a company called Future Knowledge, and some of you may have heard of us, particularly those of you that are in Australia. We're a management consultancy focused on what we would say is maximising the adoption of workforce technology deployments. So we really specialise around helping organisations to connect people and process to some of the best HR and talent management technologies in the marketplace now. So we're trusted advisors to some of the leading organisations in this part of the world. We help them to develop their strategies, to select and to implement, and also to optimise their HR and talent management solutions. We've been around for around 9 years now, and in that time we've delivered over 120 successful projects that have helped organisations to build their capability, both here in Australia and also in across the Asia Pacific region. So yes, I'll hand you back to Mel to take us through the presentation.
Thanks, David. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce you to the first ever State of Talent Management Asia Pacific perspective. I'd just like to point out we will be answering questions at the end of the session. If you would like to ask a question at any point during the webinar, please just type it into your chat and we'll answer them at the end. We'll try to get through as many as we have, time dependent. In 2013, the global team of Silk Road launched a report called The State of Talent Management. This was based on the results of 8 key surveys, which were conducted throughout the year, and they were on a wide range of topics, including talent management technology, talent acquisition trends, compliance, performing and learning, and employee engagement hurdles, among others. The report was actually launched in January of this year. However, it brings together the findings of all of those different surveys to provide essential advice on how to implement integrated HR technology. The goals of the report were to gain accurate data, which provides organizational transparency, convert data-driven insights into strategy, and help HR secure a seat at the table by creating a strategic vision. And the surveys identified 4 key challenges. Again, integrated HR technology, accurate, accessible data, how to convert that data, and how to earn a seat. While these findings were extremely interesting, unfortunately, because most of the surveys were conducted in the global market, they didn't really reflect what's happening here in Asia on the ground. And as such, we wanted to provide something that delivered valuable insights to people operating here in the region. As such, we spoke with several leading HR practitioners, industry experts, and people such as David to find out more about their thoughts on how HR is viewed in the region and the key findings from the global report. With this in mind, we also wanted to outline the backdrop, the market reality against which HR and companies within the region are operating today. I think it's safe to say we all understand that Asia Pacific has an extraordinarily highly competitive talent market in today's age. There's a limited talent pool in terms of the necessary skill sets that companies are looking for. However, we're also battling extremely high attrition rates throughout the region. And there have been several reports suggesting that this year we'll have our highest attrition rates ever. With that in mind, it's becoming increasingly hard to attract, motivate, and retain key employees. So in order to achieve this and really help companies, or your company, to gain a competitive edge, it's essential that HR develop a strategic plan that supports business objectives and that you become a strategic partner to the business. However, there is unfortunately a continuing significant gap between where HR need to be and how they're generally perceived within the marketplace. As a whole, HR continues to be viewed primarily as a tactical function throughout the region. And while there are obviously more advanced organizations who do view HR as very strategic, in general, HR tends to be viewed as an organization that processes payroll, sources CVs, and generally handles a lot of administrative tasks. HR is also viewed as having limited capability. This isn't necessarily, they're not necessarily able to operate at a strategic level and are much more likely to, again, stay in that administrative safe zone. HR are often viewed as showing a poor understanding of the business. They don't clearly understand how they support business objectives or where the company is going, or even how HR goals can be developed that will help drive business. In addition, HR continues to be seen as something of a corporate police officer who implement programs and performance management learning systems, for example, that are time-consuming and must be completed rather than delivering value. They're often viewed as still being quite siloed as well, with team members being limited to certain functions such as recruitment or payroll. And in some cases, not all, but some cases, HR are perceived as having a sense of entitlement to a seat at the table rather than actively looking to demonstrate value and how they can really earn that seat. So with all of this in mind, we spoke to our thought leaders around the region and we asked, given the market perception, what can HR be doing in order to really take that next step and become a strategic partner? And what we learned is there are 7 key steps to earning a seat at the table. The first step is to really learn about the business. It's also really important to develop a robust HR technology infrastructure that will help free up time and allow you to support the business. Companies need to ramp up their efforts in terms of talent acquisition, making sure they secure the best talent possible, and really embed performance management to retain that talent. It's important to introduce meaningful learning programs that develop employees from within, and to actively engage employees through their entire life cycle, not just from once they've been at the company for a couple of years. And finally, given the legislative landscape, it's very important to ensure regulatory compliance as well. Now, I'm going to hand over to David now so that he can talk to you about through these 7 steps in more detail.
Great. Thanks, Melinda. Well, I think what you've outlined there so far tells us that HR's got a bit of a PR problem. So, those perceptions are, have been around for quite some time, and I think we've always battled to up the ante in terms of how we're perceived in organisations. So, what I'm going to do now is provide you with some commentary around each of these 7 steps, and hopefully give you some more practical ways in which you can connect with these yourselves. So that first step is around learning about the business itself. And it's really important that, if we talked about that perception of a sense of entitlement. Now, in my mind, I think we are entitled as HR practitioners to having a strategic input and therefore a seat at the table. So I guess I'm not hugely keen on us having to earn that right, but in my mind, one of the best ways we can do that is to really get to know the business itself and make sure that you can align what you do, the initiatives that you drive, with the delivery of business value. And that's going to help us to really create the right sort of language and connect with the objectives at the CEO level. So understanding how talent underpins your company's performance and growth objectives, connecting your initiatives to key strategic plans, doing things like learning how to read a P&L. It's interesting. I work with a lot of HR people, and I was one of these myself who probably went through a fair proportion of my HR career, didn't really get how to read a P&L or a set of accounts. And I think it's hard for us to go begging for money with cap in hand to the CFO if we can't truly articulate what the ROI is going to be, what a net present value looks like for the money that's about to be invested in what we do. And it's also important that we show that we understand risk and governance and compliance, and that's something we'll talk to a little bit later on. So it is really important that we learn about the business, and I think one of the keys here is we've got to stop selling what we do to the organisation, and we've got to start engaging more. We've got to actually operate as if we are a true strategic partner in the business. So looking at step number 2, developing a robust HR technology infrastructure. And look, I think this is a really important step, and obviously a lot of the commentators that were broached in the surveys have indicated this is something that's really important. And I think there's a couple of key elements here. One is developing a technology infrastructure that helps us to truly automate the transactional activities that we do. So this is something we continue to be striving towards. And I think if we think about the HR operating models that we've been endeavouring to embed, the Dave Ulrich HR business partner models that started in the mid-90s, really what's happened is technology's kind of let us down over the years, and it's really only just catching up now, and probably what we're seeing with the latest technologies are enabling us now to create an HR ecosystem where managers and employees can use direct access to access information, to manage their own information, and I guess self-serve on a lot of their HR needs. And what this then enables us to do is to focus our HR resources on more higher level, perhaps strategic activities such as partnering with managers and with leaders to help coach them, to help them to manage change, which is something that's increasingly important as the cycles of technology and of change in a macro and microeconomic sense are pushing us further. So managing change is a really key deliverable of an HR function as well. So that's step 2. Step 3 is about talent acquisition, and the commentators have said that ramping up talent acquisition is a critical step and something that we should be delivering as a strategic component of what we do. And as the world's coming out of the grip of the GFC, and parts of Asia, probably we were in pretty good shape coming out of there. So we're swiftly moving back into that mode of critical talent shortages, and it's hard to attract. It's even harder to retain that key talent that we want in our organisations to drive our competitive advantage. So what technology then helps us to do is to streamline those processes through the talent acquisition piece. But it also helps us to better engage that talent right from the point of attraction through to onboarding, and then hopefully accelerating them into being a high performer in the organisation. And that's really a critical piece. If we can get on top of that and deliver that value to the organisation, dealing with the war for talent is now pretty high up on the KPIs and the agendas of most CEOs and organisations. So we can make a big impact if we get on top of that. If we move to the 4th step, it's really about performance management. And performance has been a critical component of what HR has delivered in organisations. And I've seen the good, the bad, the ugly over about 20 odd years of working with HR teams and working in HR teams on this one. And what I think we've typically seen is performance management being a very tactical function, being something that employees and managers do just to comply, not always engaged in the process. And I think we've always had difficulty in really making performance a truly embedded component of what happens in organisations. And I'm a mad sports fan, so I always kind of look at what's going on in the sporting world. And I think performance, if you look at every football club, elite athletes, tennis players, dragon boat crews, they've all got a high performance manager somewhere in their organisation. And those people are there to look at the analytics, look at data that they capture from performance metrics and from training. They use that to assess the capability and then to design specific programs to bring out the best in those individuals and in those teams. And that's really the mindset that we need to be in as HR practitioners too. We're not just there to track and monitor and to be the police officers around performance appraisals. We're there to develop a culture in the organisation where coaches and athletes, or managers and employees, collaborate through constant feedback in groups and one-on-one. That assessment's going on day in, day out. We're using opportunities when tangible achievement occurs. Just like the football team winning the World Cup, or tennis player, winning the Australian Open, or even just being able to do a personal best time. We're looking for those little achievements that we can help to embed that performance culture and help individuals to see the positivity in their performance. So that's a critical piece, and that's something that I can't emphasise enough in terms of our ability to get a seat at the table. So moving on from there, and I think it's natural when we talk about performance to talk about learning. And learning is something that I think continues to be, and I think it's becoming more and more in vogue as we're moving into an era where lots of different technologies are helping us to drive learning programs. The key thing is that we create meaningful learning programs, that they're relevant. These learning experiences are connected to things like competencies, to individual development plans, to our succession and career plans, to help us guide learners through a pathway to taking on knowledge, learning new skills, and being able to apply them effectively in the context of our organisations. Increasingly, we've got opportunity to expand the horizons of what we do with learning. Social learning now gives us the opportunity to bring more informal modes of learning to our employees and our managers, helping them to curate that content that they find out there in that big wide world of the internet, bring it into the organisation and point people towards that is an incredibly powerful mechanism if we can harness that. It's also important to note that by next year, and I think this is already the case in some Asian markets particularly, we're going to have more people accessing the internet from a smartphone or a tablet than from a desktop computer. So if we're still creating content for e-learning programs that can only be delivered on a desktop or only be delivered in the classroom, we're going to be missing, we're not going to be relevant. So we really need to be thinking about how we can use mobiles to deliver, and having the deployment mechanisms through contemporary learning management systems to deploy those effectively. So let's move on to the 6th step, and that's really about employee engagement. And again, the commentators have put forward this as a really key measure of how we can get a strategic seat at the strategic table. Employee engagement continues to be critical, particularly in Asia Pacific. We talked about there being high growth. We talked about there being skills shortages in terms of attraction, but also the highest attrition rates ever are what are being anticipated this year in 2014. So the conventional sort of one-off activities around onboarding and inductions are not enough. We've really got to start engaging employees much throughout that life cycle. We've got to start at the point of attraction. We've got to continue that, especially through that critical first 6 months. Having the tools and technologies to enable us to deliver and to engage effectively is really important. And again, as we move towards the year 2020, when we're going to reach the point where the generation of millennials will be the predominant generation in the workforce, these employees or these people are going to be digital natives. They've known nothing but computers and working with the internet. They're tribal, so they're not necessarily loyal to an organisation. They're loyal to a group of peers or to like-minded people, and we've got to harness that in different ways than what we've traditionally done. So that onboarding piece is really an important facet, backed up with really good collaboration and engagement tools that we can use to connect those employees. And having managers and leaders that get this, because at the end of the day, people don't leave companies, they leave. So those onboarding efforts and those engagement activities need to be supported by managers who know what they're doing and they get it. So let's move on to the final step. And this, I always think this is the boring one, but it's really important that we do play our role as the assurance for the regulatory and legislative compliance that relates to people, that relates to the risk that we have when we have workforces that we need to manage. So with this one, simply stated, it's our job to make sure that we have this covered. If we use technology to help us to streamline this, to ensure that we've got automation making the compliance pieces just happen simply, and we back that up with good training and communications, this is going to enable us to, hopefully not tie up too much of our resource in just managing the day-to-day compliance activity. It's really important that we do it. Once we've done this properly, we can move off to the cool stuff. So I'd say use technology to support it, create reports out of that technology layer, out of the data that you capture, that are going to get your bosses off your back. You really want to be able to just make it a non-issue, let them see that things are being managed, that the risk is off the table, and then that'll allow you to focus on the cool stuff. So that's the 7 steps. And I think, I don't think a lot of this is incredibly new, but it's really interesting to see the priorities that our peers and other commentators in the region are saying are important elements for us to be able to deliver strategic value. So I won't read those out again because we've gone through those, but what's really important here is that technology underpinning all of these areas are enabling us as HR professionals to achieve a much more important focus and I guess a strategic role in the organisation. So I'll throw back to Melinda. We've got a little bit of time left, I think, just to take some questions that have come through. So I'm certainly happy to stay on and do that.
for our participants. We have a question from the audience. I've been asked, could you please elaborate on engaging employees throughout the entire life cycle?
Yes, thanks. Great question. And I think it is something that we do tend to have a little difficulty with. And it's where technology is starting to help us a little more. We've focused a lot of energy around onboarding, and it's seen to be that critical point of engagement. But engagement happens in a number of ways in organisations. So I think it's really about the relationship that the individual has with the organisation itself, and how connected they feel to the brand. So I mentioned that millennials, for example, are tribal. They will attach themselves to what they see as the worth of the brand and how that connects to them personally. So if we're doing a great job around building that brand and connecting the values that we have and the sense of purpose that we have as an organisation, that can go a long way to ensuring that employees continue to feel strongly engaged. The other aspect of that is more at the granular level of the manager-employee relationship. This is a critical one. I mentioned before that people leave, or don't leave companies, they leave bosses. So giving our managers and leaders better tools to engage, better skills to be able to communicate effectively, and to help individuals to strive to achieve their potential goes a long way towards engagement. High levels, don't become part of that high level of attrition. So hopefully there's a couple of points there. There's plenty that I could talk about around engagement. In fact, I did a presentation with in collaboration with Silk Road about that. One might be something we could find in the archives for that person who's asked the question to go back and have a look at as well. Any other questions there, Melinda?
Thank you. Yes, we have one more question for you here, David.
Great.
We have a participant who's mentioned that they've already implemented a couple of HR systems, however they're struggling with the integration of their systems. How important do you feel it is that HR systems talk to each other?
Yep. Look, that's a great question again too, and I think this is an issue that I'm talking to a lot of HR departments about at the moment. I mentioned before that the technology has really kind of let us down, and it's in this area of integration, and I think to some extent perhaps we've been striving too hard to achieve a single source of truth out of one system at the expense of being able to deliver the high level of service and the programs that we want to, using the information that's captured. So I'm of the view now that if you look at your HR operating model and you consider the administrative or transactional layer as being something that you could almost, in some parts, outsource, if it's sort of payroll and core HR information, and focus really on how you can connect the core information back through to an integrated talent management platform. I think there's now probably two key layers that are important in your HR technology landscape. They don't necessarily have to be out of one solution, and in fact it's very rare to find one solution out there that most organisations can afford that can do everything out of one database, if you like. Most of the technology, particularly the talent management vendors, have fairly open architectures that enable pretty good integration to occur from a data perspective, and I would encourage looking into those as a mechanism to connect the systems rather than having to think about one single platform. You'll need help from your IT folk. They're not totally redundant in this world of cloud and SaaS. They can provide a really good role in terms of helping us to find smart ways of moving data around so we've got what we need to do our jobs properly. So I hope that helps. Again, it's a topic that we could spend a whole session on, and I'd be happy to do so at a point in time.
Another question. We have lots of questions coming through now.
Yes.
One of our participants mentioned that limited budget is often a showstopper when enabling HR to push for new technology. What do you say to this, and how do you get around that?
Yeah, it's the age-old problem. I don't think we'll ever get to a point where we can truly just have a blank checkbook on this stuff. Unfortunately, we HR people continue to have to battle with how to show the value for what we do with technology investments. In my view, the best way of addressing that is to look at doing smaller chunks. So whether that's to take on just a module of a solution, and Silk Road's certainly one of those solutions that works very well in terms of being able to deploy just a single module and build out a solution from there. I think it's really important for us to get runs on the board. So biting off something that actually has quite a high impact first, and I've found that learning can often be that that piece of the puzzle that has a high impact. It's also a fairly less risky element of the whole talent management piece. And learning management systems can pretty much stand alone. They don't need a lot of data integration with other systems, yet they are high impact. They can deliver value to the whole organisation in a short period of time, give them access to learning programs and things that are meaningful to them. So I think that's an example of I guess getting runs on the board. The other part of it is about doing a proper job of putting the business case together in the first place. We work with a lot of organisations that probably rush into the talent management system piece because they've got an urgent initiative. The CEO said, I want to focus on performance management this year. I need a new system, and you've got 2.5 weeks to put one in before this year's cycle starts. It's really not going to help you look at the current state of what you're doing, think about what the future state might look like, and use that to show the benefits that can be derived from bringing technology to the table around that. I think if you can take a step back, take some time to think through the strategy and articulate that in a really clear language to not just the HR stakeholders, but importantly the C-level and the CFO who can, if we can put that the true value proposition, put the ROI in effectively of those business cases, we're going to find better levels of support. So those would be my two key tips there: business case, bite off a small chunk, and get some runs on the board so you can move through perhaps a program of work. Any other questions there, Melinda?
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, we have. I think we have time for one more question. It's a good one.
Okay.
How do you advise HR to manage senior leaders whose expectation for HR is simply to follow their orders rather than engaging them as a business partner?
Yeah, it is a tricky one, and I know there are some individuals and organisations who really may never see the true value of what their HR directors and their HR departments can bring. I think we've got to walk the talk. So again, I mentioned before, we've got to stop selling what we do and just start engaging. And the best way to engage is to ask questions. So I think if we're being directed to do things and we don't necessarily think that's going to be the best use of our time and resources, or it's going to deliver the best outcome, we should stick our hand up and really try to seek to understand why that directive is coming rather than just blindly following it, which perhaps we've been guilty of in the past. So if we can actually start to help those senior executives to challenge their own thinking, asking them, how does this initiative you're asking me to drive really help connect with perhaps a business strategy or a strategic objective we might have to enter a new market. If we can bring some understanding and show that we get the strategic imperative, and if those senior people can't see it for themselves, perhaps we can facilitate that by asking questions, by getting them to see a different approach and to steer the ship in a different direction. It's not easy. Those are high-level skills that we need to work hard on. But as I say, if we stop trying to sell what we do and start, demonstrating the value and connecting with broader business objectives, that's going to go some or all of the way to help with that challenge.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you so much for your insights, David. It's been really interesting to learn more about the practical steps HR can take in order to really become much more strategic and help support business objectives. If anybody does have any more questions they would like to ask, please feel free to send them over at a later stage. We will be recording today's session, and that will be made available in the coming days. So we'll send that over to you so you can either listen in again or share it with colleagues. But in the meantime, I'd just like to say thank you very much again to David and to all of our participants who've taken the time to join us today.